Having your own home is awesome, but it's also a lot of work. The good news? Finding help for your projects is easier than ever. Introducing Angie, the app that puts all your home care needs at your fingertips. Need a pro to fix that emergency leak? Maybe find someone to build a deck, or even set your seasonal tasks on autopilot. Angie can handle all that and more. Expert pros, hundreds of home projects, clear pricing, and the easiest way to book and pay in seconds. This is Angie, your home for everything home. Download the app today.
If you don't have it, get it. The new AM590 app, powered by Woodhouse Chrysler Jeep Dodge Ram. Download now from the App Store or Google Play.
Oh, such a fun U.S. Open over the weekend. In fact, going into Sunday, we had about 20 or so, all within 5 shots of the lead, so you knew that Sunday was going to have some drama as we get into the U.S. Open recap, going to the Limitless Male Medical Hotline, welcoming Matt Rudy of Golf Digest. And, Matt, I know when I talked to you on Wednesday of last week, you had mentioned Jon Rahm, and we said Jon Rahm 2 years ago, if something similar happened to him like it did at Memorial, if there was these COVID protocols and he's leading going into the final round of the Memorial and then finds out that he tested positive, that we could see that sort of be the undoing of Jon Rahm. And I asked you, have we watched that maturation process before our eyes here in the last couple of years? And you pointed out the fact that he's married and that he has a son now, and we got to see the little guy there as they soaked in the moment. I mean, I just don't feel like you could write a better script for this year's U.S. Open champion.
Well, not only that, you had a bit of everything. You had Richard Bland co-leading after 2 rounds. You had the 48-year-old guy from England that nobody had ever heard of. You had Rory McIlroy make an appearance, and you had all different kinds of storylines and a jump ball. And then at the end of it, the guy who played great on the back nine on Sunday won the tournament. So I think everyone can be satisfied that the golf course was picturesque, and it didn't. It was a factor, but it wasn't the factor. The players were able to decide it, on the course, and I think that was a win for the fans, and it was a emphatic win for Jon Rahm. It was an amazing finish for sure. 17.
Well, Matt, you mentioned the win for the fans, and it was kind of symbolic because I think a lot of us sort of had images of Tiger Woods with that fist pump after he made that miraculous putt at Torrey Pines, some 17 years ago or so. And the roar of that gallery, obviously, it was maybe a little bit more noticeable when Tiger did it than when Jon Rahm. But when you see the emotion and the fist pump that Jon Rahm, at least for a moment there, thought maybe he had done enough, but also to get that sort of fan reaction. We saw that at the PGA Championship when Phil won too, but it's a constant reminder that, golf, especially how weird it was to watch those majors without fans. It's amazing maybe some of the things that we take for granted in the sport.
Yeah, and I mean, just think of what happened last year with the cancellation of the British Open. They moved tournaments around, and they're playing the Masters in November. They're playing the U.S. Open in the fall. I mean, every one of those things just reminded everyone, and no fans, reminded how much of an outlier this past season was. But when you look at the people who won those tournaments, and all the way up, even including Phil at the PGA last month, we haven't gotten crazy, no-name brand winners. We've gotten brand name winners, and we've gotten DJ winning the Masters in a weird time. We have Bryson DeChambeau with a dominant performance at the U.S. Open last year. I think it's been the players that have been able to deal with the craziness and kind of go in their own tunnel and get it done. And really, that's what Rahm did. We talked about it, like you said. He was able to put the COVID stuff aside and not throw his clubs into the bottom of Lake Erie, and bring them with him to San Diego and get it done.
Talking to Matt Rudy of Golf Digest here on AM 590. So, Matt, when Jon Rahm sinks that second consecutive birdie and does so on 18 to finish his round, did you think at that time that was enough, or did you think Louis Oosthuizen had enough at least to push a playoff at that point?
Well, I think the 18 is very birdieable. If you want to play it for a birdie and you don't go for the green in 2, it's a pretty easy hole, and I think it was playing as the easiest hole on the golf course all 4 days. So I think the odds were that if he could just get away without any damage on 17, that you're looking at a playoff. So I don't know that I felt that Oosthuizen was going to win, but he was certainly in a great position to force a playoff. But I mean, what's amazing is when you watch a guy with a swing like Oosthuizen has, it's just a beautiful action, and I think it's almost shocking when the ball goes offline. And to hit the ball in the one place he couldn't hit it on 17, it just shows you that when the pressure ratchets up, even the best players in the world can crack, just like we would playing for a $10 Nassau on the weekend.
Yeah. Do you think this is sort of the beginning of many more to come for Jon Rahm? When you kind of look at historically when players of that caliber finally knock down that door of getting that first major, that all of a sudden you can really expect a lot more to come, especially given the way that he sort of approaches the game?
No question. He had every piece in place before that. The number one ranking in the world, and when he was on cruise control, he's dominating some of the best fields in the game. The only thing he hadn't done is win a major, and he's a little bit younger than Phil was, but that's what happened to Phil when Phil finally broke through and won his first major. He went on a run over 4 or 5 years where he picked up 4 of them, and it's not hard to see that happening for Rahm, especially when you look at the landscape and there's not a figure like Tiger Woods looming who is a threat to win half of all the ones he enters.
So the other part of yesterday, you mentioned Bryson DeChambeau, the defending champion. He's at one point there getting ready to make the turn, is up by a stroke, leading it, and a chance to defend that U.S. Open victory from a year ago. And then the back nine happened, and a 44 on the back nine. And, again, we've talked about this, Matt. He's calculated with knowing that his approach to the game, his swing, the distance and everything that goes with it, there are going to be some violent misses, but there's also going to be some major victories that come with those swings. And I know he said yesterday that he felt it was just not being able to get a good break on the back nine. How did you kind of look at the front and the back for Bryson yesterday?
Well, I think he's telling himself that he didn't give it away because it's better psychologically to believe that. But I think that his entire week was that same kind of practice, because he was playing poorly coming in, and he played poorly the first 2 days. And the story that he found something while he was sleeping, going into Saturday morning, I think you need to tell yourself some of those stories to try to feel better about what's happening and psych yourself up. And he was able to conjure something a little bit, but ultimately, when it got time to win and to close the door, there was just too much. The variance that he has anyway because of the club head speed is always going to be there, but when you're just a little bit off at those kinds of speeds, you can't control the ball, and he put it in places you can't put it. And the U.S. Open bit him. I give him credit because he kept to his strategy, but when you put it in those crazy spots, you can't win.
Matt, something that you had brought up that I thought was really interesting, and this kind of goes back to the whole DeChambeau-Koepka rivalry, is that Koepka's not one of those guys that sort of has that large inner circle of friends or within the PGA, and one of the reasons you brought up is because he can still play sort of that intimidation factor. It always seems like he's kind of that ultimate competitor machine that if he is lurking on Sunday, that you're sort of taking notice of that. When it comes to the last few weeks of this whole episode between he and DeChambeau, do you feel like all of a sudden Koepka's maybe getting out of a little bit of that laser focus, and maybe there is now a little bit of that looking over his shoulder or looking around him to see what Bryson is up to? I guess maybe the better question is he paying too much attention to Bryson these days compared to what he would at any other occasion?
That's a good point, and it's hard to know what's going on in his head, but ultimately, in order to keep up the intimidation act, for it to continue to work, you have to have results. So if you're not getting it done on Sunday for whatever reason, if it's because the thing with Bryson is in his head, if he's not quite healed from the knee injury, or pick your reason, if the results don't follow and you don't close the deal, it doesn't take very many of those in a row before people start to demand that you do it again, before they're going to give you that kind of respect or that kind of fear. So, he's definitely put himself there at a lot of majors, and he's won a lot of them. And there are any number of 100 players in the world that would kill to have his low point, which is not getting it done on Sunday, but still finishing top 5 or top 7 in a major. I mean, that's a fine accomplishment. But to your point, to keep up the intimidation and to be able to sell that, you have to continue to close the door, and we haven't seen that now for a couple of years.
One guy I also wanted to get your thoughts on, too, and we've talked about a couple of golfers that have kind of lost their confidence along the way, whether it's more of a short-lived thing or, a multi-year thing like a Jordan Spieth. But Matthew Wolff, just coming back from the PG or the Masters and, the last month now also just basically, to his own account, not having confidence in his game. What did you take away from just his 4 rounds this week? I know he didn't have a good one necessarily yesterday, but as far as being able to maybe get that confidence back on a guy who clearly is a very young and exciting golfer.
It's interesting because Ben Simmons just had a terrible series for the 76ers in the NBA playoffs, and I think there's a lot of commonality in those experiences because you're talking about young men. They're in their early 20s, and to absorb everything that happens, being a professional athlete, trying to figure out the right pattern that works for you to do that successfully. I think for some players, there are growing pains involved because it's difficult. It's difficult because of 24-hour attention and social media. It's difficult to move into adulthood and be in control of your own money and your own decisions and when you're going to train and when you aren't. And I think there's going to be stretches where players struggle, and I give them credit. And Ben Simmons the same way. They both, they walked up to the microphone and said, "Hey, I struggled and I got to work on some stuff. And if it takes some time, it takes some time." But you're right. I mean, he's got incredible talent, and the fact that he's been able to preserve his idiosyncratic swing and not change it around in an effort to conform and to look more like the norm, I think bodes well for his future.
Well, Matt, we've got, Travelers this weekend, Rocket Mortgage Classic. Before we know it, we're going to have the Open at Royal St. George, and that will be back. And if you're starting to kind of look ahead, I mean, would the smart money right now be, Jon Rahm being able to keep this momentum, or are there some other guys you're kind of keeping your eye on the next couple of weeks to see if they can sort of crack that contention list for Royal St. George?
I love what Rahm is doing, and it'll be fun to see how he can consolidate that. And Rory hit a lot of really good little wedge shots on Saturday and Sunday at the U.S. Open that had been the place that he really struggled. And when you can put him on a venue where you've got some room to drive it, and there's more creativity, you can hit some lower shots if you want to. I think we're going to see Rory come back and be the player he was before too. So if you were asking me for 2 guys, I'd pick those 2 guys.
Yeah, that's the 2 very good ones right there. Matt Rudy of Golf Digest joining us. Matt, appreciate you coming on. I'm sure we'll catch up with you before we get into some Open coverage.
You bet, anytime.
Matt Rudy, Golf Digest, always good stuff from him. All right, when we come back, so there will be fans allowed in venues at the Tokyo Summer Games, but there is one rule in particular that I have zero clue on how they are going to be able to pull off, and I'll tell you what that is after the break.